There's a house on West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township, just outside Chicago. A ranch-style home, neat lawn, a man who hosted neighborhood barbecues, dressed as a clown for children's hospitals, and shook hands with the First Lady of the United States. And beneath the floorboards, 33 young men and boys. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy. Not the clown, not the monster the tabloids built. This is the story of 33 lives cut short, 5 still without names, and the institutional failures that let it go on far longer than it ever should have. John Wayne Gacy Jr. was born on March 17, 1942, at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. The second of 3 children, he grew up in a working-class Catholic household on the northwest side of the city. His father, John Stanley Gacy Sr., was a machinist and a veteran of World War I, and by almost every account, a difficult, volatile man who drank heavily and did not hesitate to use his belt. Gacy's mother and sisters bore the brunt of his temper, but young John was not spared. He was called stupid. He was called a sissy. He was told repeatedly that he would never amount to anything. At age 11, Gacy was struck in the head by a playground swing, causing a blood clot that went undetected for years. He experienced periodic blackouts throughout his adolescence. He was also diagnosed with a non-specific heart condition that kept him out of physical education and set him further apart from his peers. He was overweight, awkward, and desperate for approval, particularly from a father who would never give it to him. He dropped out of high school. He drifted through jobs. He briefly attended Northwestern Business College, and then in 1964, seeking a new start, he moved to Springfield, Illinois to work as a management trainee for a shoe company. There he met Marlon Myers, the daughter of a franchise owner. They married in 1964. He became a manager. He joined the JCs, the United States Junior Chamber, and threw himself into civic life with an intensity that impressed everyone around him. He was good at this. The performance of normalcy. He was named Key Man of the Year by the Illinois chapter of the JCs in 1967. But behind the civic awards and the neighborhood cookouts, something else was taking shape. In 1967, Gacy was accused of sexually assaulting a teenage boy named Donald Voorhees, the son of a fellow JC. He denied it. Then he was accused again. In 1968, he was indicted by an Iowa grand jury on a charge of sodomy. He attempted to have another young man beat up Voorhees to prevent him from testifying. It did not work. On December 3, 1968, John Wayne Gacy pleaded guilty to the charge of sodomy. He was sentenced to 10 years at the Iowa State Reformatory for Men in Anamosa. His wife divorced him within weeks. He never saw his 2 children again. He was a model prisoner, organized, industrious, helpful. He ran the prison canteen, and he was paroled after just 18 months on June 18, 1970. He moved back to Chicago to live with his mother, and within a year was renting his own home at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township. He should have been registered as a sex offender in Illinois. He was not. Iowa had failed to notify the Illinois Department of Corrections of his conviction. The paperwork fell through the cracks, and John Wayne Gacy disappeared into the suburbs. His first known murder occurred on January 3, 1972. His name was Timothy McCoy. He was 16 years old and had accidentally entered Gacy's home while his bus made a layover in Chicago. Gacy later told investigators that he awoke to find McCoy standing over him with a kitchen knife, meant McCoy claimed for preparing breakfast. Gacy described what followed as a panic. He stabbed Timothy McCoy 4 times in the chest. He later said that he experienced, for the first time in his life, what he described as an orgasm from the act of killing. Timothy McCoy was buried in the crawl space. Gacy went on. He started a construction company, PDM Contractors. He employed young men, many of them teenagers looking for work. He hired from the street corners where runaways and drifters gathered. He became a Democratic Party precinct captain. He threw elaborate parties for the neighborhood. He performed at children's hospitals as Pogo the Clown, a character he invented himself with hand-sewn costumes and painted smiles. He photographed himself in character and sent the photos to friends. He posed for a picture with Rosalind Carter, wife of President Jimmy Carter, in May 1978. The Secret Service had cleared him. Between 1972 and 1978, young men continued to vanish from the northwest side of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. They were runaways. They were day laborers. They were young men looking for work or a party or a ride home. Their families called the police. The police, overworked, underfunded, and operating in an era before centralized missing persons databases, did not connect the disappearances to one another or to the neat house on West Summerdale. John Butkovich, 18 years old, disappeared in July 1975. His parents went to the police. They suspected Gacy. John had worked for PDM and had an argument with Gacy over back pay. Police visited Gacy. He was cooperative, articulate, and gave them nothing. But Kovich's remains were later found buried in Gacy's garage. Gregory Godzik, 17, disappeared in December 1976. His parents called police and specifically named Gacy as the last person to see their son. Officers interviewed Gacy. Again, nothing came of it. Godzik had been helping Gacy dig a drainage trench in the crawl space beneath the house, and still it continued. In March 1978, a young man named Jeffrey Rignall was lured into Gacy's car with the promise of marijuana and conversation. Gacy chloroformed him, drove him to West Summerdale, and subjected him to hours of assault. Rignall was left barely alive in a Chicago park. He went to police. He told them everything he could remember. He described the car, the smell of the chloroform, fragments of a highway route. Police told him there was little they could do without a license plate number. Rignall was not deterred. He sat in his car for days near the highway entrance ramps he could recall and waited. He identified Gacy's car himself. He filed a civil lawsuit. And still, for months, the criminal investigation moved at a crawl. Jeffrey Rignall had survived John Wayne Gacy, had done the police's work for them, and was told to wait. The final piece came in December 1978. On December 11th, 15-year-old Robert Peast left his job at a pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois, to meet a contractor who had offered him a summer job. He never came home. His mother, Elizabeth Peasts, was waiting for him at the pharmacy when he left. She filed a missing persons report that same night. The investigating officer, Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchak of the Des Plaines Police Department, was not willing to let this one go quietly. He checked records. He found that a local contractor named John Wayne Gacy had been at that pharmacy the same night. He ran Gacy's name. What came back stopped him cold. A 1968 sodomy conviction in Iowa. Gacy was brought in for questioning. He was smooth, polished, and explained away everything. But Kozenchak obtained a search warrant for Gacy's home. Officers entered on December 13th. They found a high school class ring, pharmacy receipt paper, handcuffs, a police badge, and, most critically, an overwhelming smell rising from beneath the house. One officer described it as a smell he had encountered before, only in one context. Gacy was placed under 24-hour surveillance. On December 19th, 1978, after hours of psychological pressure, Gacy told his attorney he had been killing people. On December 21st, officers returned with an excavation warrant. They began digging. They found the first remains in the crawl space within hours. They would not stop finding them for weeks. 29 victims were buried in and around the property. 4 more had been thrown from bridges into the Illinois and Des Plaines rivers. On December 22, 1978, John Wayne Gacy was arrested. His trial began on February 6, 1980, in Cook County Circuit Court before Judge Louis B. Garipo. The defense, led by attorneys Sam Amarante and Robert Mora, argued that Gacy was legally insane, that he suffered from multiple personality disorder and could not be held responsible for the murders. Prosecutors, led by William Kunkel and Terry Sullivan, systematically dismantled that argument. They demonstrated Gacy's meticulous planning, The rope tricks he used to subdue victims, the chloroform, the methodical burial of remains, the construction work used to conceal the crawl space. This was not a man who did not know what he was doing. On March 12, 1980, after only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all 33 counts of murder. Judge Garipo sentenced Gacy to death 12 times over, once for each victim for whom the death penalty applied under Illinois law. John Wayne Gacy spent 14 years on death row. He continued to paint, most famously his self-portraits as Pogo the Clown, which sold at auction for thousands of dollars each, a fact that outraged families of his victims. He gave interviews. He maintained to the end that he was not responsible for what had happened in that house. At 12:58 in the morning on May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois. His last words directed at a prison official were, "Kiss my ass." 25 victims were under the age of 21. 5 of Gacy's victims remain unidentified to this day, though ongoing DNA genealogy work by the Cook County Sheriff's Office has made progress in recent years, identifying Francis Wayne Alexander in 2021, decades after his family had stopped knowing where to look for him. Their names deserve to be spoken: Timothy McCoy, John Butkovich, Gregory Godzik, Robert Peast, Michael Bonin, William Carroll, Rick Johnston, James Mazzara, Darrell Sampson, Samuel Stapleton, Billy Carroll, Matthew Bowman, Robert Gilroy, John Maury, Russell Nelson, Tommy Bowling, David Talsma, Frank Landingen, James Hackinson, Randy Reffitt. David Cram was one of the young men who survived working for Gacy long enough to testify. Jeffrey Rignall, who survived a direct attack, went on to publish a memoir, Write to Congress, and fight for survivors' rights until his death in 2000. The house on West Summerdale Avenue was demolished in April 1979. A new home was built on the lot. Families of victims had asked for a memorial. They received a new house in a quiet neighborhood. The legacy of this case is not the clown, it is not the paintings. It is the 33 young men who deserved better from the world around them, from the Iowa Parole Board, from the Illinois Corrections System, from a Chicago Police Department that saw missing young men from the margins and looked away. It is Jeffrey Rignall who told the truth and was not believed until it was too late. It is the 5 young men whose families still do not know their sons are never coming home. Remember that. If this case stayed with you, if you believe these stories deserve to be told the right way, please subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and drop a comment below telling us whose story we should cover next. Every case we cover is a name that deserves not to be forgotten. We'll see you in the next one.